ADHD with Alex High, and today, Alan P. Brown, who is the ADD crusher. Some of you may know him under that name, but he has been influential in my career. He's helped me a lot learning how to market myself and put myself out there, and he's been an inspiration to me. So I'm thrilled to have him. And Alan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for being here. You're inspiring me, brother. We were
Mm,
just talking about this before you hit record. You're doing some cool stuff. So goes both ways, my friend.
thank you. Alan, what's your ADHD story?
Well, I have to think about it. I've never told my story before. Now, I really love this question because it's just great to remember your story. It's great to go, wait, okay, let's go back and recount the story because we don't want to forget our story. So I'm somebody who grew up in the 70s, really, and school was not very demanding back then. So it was a good thing. Maybe it wasn't a good thing, but I was undiagnosed with ADHD, and me and my buddies, we just clowned around. I don't remember bringing a book home ever. I don't remember doing homework except the night before, et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't a very rigorous public school I went to back in Jersey, but um, this was unfortunate on balance because I almost didn't graduate from high school. I was able to skate through. I was the funny guy, and I was able to sort of get by reading the last few pages of a book the night before or whatever. And I had no idea that was ADHD. Of course, back then nobody knew what ADHD was. Few people did. But I remember my guidance counselor saying to me, with one semester to go in my senior year, she came to my homeroom class, which I rarely showed up for, and she pulled me out in the hall and she said, "Alan, do you understand that you're not going to graduate?" And I'm like, "What? Me?" I said, "No, you're in trouble, man. You got to get this kind of grades for your last semester, or else." And so I buckled down somehow and made it through. It took me 10 years to get a 4-year degree in and out of college. I was a drug addict for a good part of those 10 years. I was self-medicating, didn't realize it, of course, and then got an entry-level job in New York City as at an ad agency at the age of 30. I'm 30 years old. I had lost many years to drugs and took so long to get my degree. So all my peers are 22. They're fresh out of college, and I'm the third. Now, luckily, I didn't look my age. I'm 84, so I still don't really. But so I floundered for my first 6 years in the ad agency. Worked hard, long hours. I was cleaned up. I was off the drugs for the most part, and work came in on Saturdays, and I just still wasn't getting really any traction. That's sort of my life up until the diagnosis. Now, is my diagnosis part of the journey? Should I continue with that?
Yeah.
A neat thing is before I was diagnosed, this is in 90 95 96. I'm 5 6 years into my advertising career, and somebody gave me the gift of an audiobook. It was Deepak Chopra's Seven Spiritual Secrets of Success, or something like that. I forget what the exact name of it, but he basically he lays out some very basic mindfulness concepts. Some of it's a little woo woo and out there, but what I realized from listening to Deepak Chopra was that most of the stuff going on up here is a bunch of nonsense. It's mostly, worries about the past, fears about the future, judging this and that and the other thing. And relatively little of it is us actually sitting down and problem solving or being loving or being in flow or whatever. So that awareness made me realize that, hey, there's this thing going on and I don't have to be part of that. So that was my first sort of brain hack, was just understanding that I could quiet that voice down a little bit. I then got into more, I was a terrible reader. And so I got into more audiobooks, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That really taught me a lot. And so I started to get some traction in the advertising business, started to get a promotion here and there, which were not very frequent in the 5 years previous to that, 6 years. And then I need to go back. So 5 years before my diagnosis, I was working at my first ad agency, and my boss was diagnosed with ADHD. And he's telling me, wow, well, tell me about that. What's going on? He says, well, my son was diagnosed by our doctor. And in the course of understanding his issue and him getting treated and all that, I realized that was me too. And as he's telling me that, I realized that's me. I said, hey, that's me. You're me. I'm you. And so that was a big revelation. Now, this was 1992. I go to my doctor at the time. He's on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It's a very nice area of New York. No, supposedly no quacky doctors there. And I say to my doctor, I say, listen, doc, I think I have ADHD. I am forgetting. I have trouble procrastination and organization. He says, Alan, and this is a direct quote, Alan, you're 32 years old, and ADD is a myth created by the media, and you just need to do more crossword puzzles because you're getting older. And I said, oh, and I believed him. And so I started doing crossword puzzles, the New York Times crossword puzzle. And I got really good at it for 5 years. Got really good at it. Wasn't helping my ADHD. I was still floundering. I wasn't getting the promotion. So anyway, I started to learn some brain hacks. And then I was sitting at a Ukrainian restaurant in the East Village of New York. They used to have a few great Ukrainian restaurants there. And I'm reading the Village Voice, on the back page of which, before they went out of business, was like a community bulletin board. And they had a little ad for the Manhattan Adult ADHD Support Group. And I think they're still going back in New York. But the topic of the talk this week was doctors who get it and doctors who don't. And I was like, oh my God. So some doctors don't get it. Huh. So I watch the presentation, and then I go to my new doctor because I was at a new ad agency then. And I ask her, hey, doc, do you get it? And she said, boy, do I. My 21-year-old son's classic case, blah, 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 put me through a battery of tests. And then I got the diagnosis and I got the treatment. And it was a combination of two drugs, which is I still use to this day, although I use less and less and less. And that was the light bulbs went off. It's like, oh my God, this is why I did this. It's why I did that. Thank you, jerk doctor, Upper East Side of Manhattan, for letting me go another 5 years without proper diagnosis and treatment. And I put the pills, the medication, in combination with the skills that I was learning. And so now I got real good traction. And within the space of a little more than 2 years, I went from a lowly account executive, 36-year-old account executive, which is like, when you're 36, you're supposed to be a vice president. Or I actually, yeah. So no, when I was like, yeah, from 34 to 36. So anyway, so I went from lowly account executive to vice president, management director, and employee of the year of the biggest ad agency in the country at the time.
Wow.
That's pills and skills. It's both. So that's my ADHD journey.
Wow. Awesome. Now, I'm curious. You mentioned pills and skills. You mentioned the personal work you went through, but what has been your key to success? If you had to narrow it down to one thing.
I think it is it's awareness. It's awareness, but it has a few dimensions. Okay. So I'm going to cheat a little bit on the question.
Okay.
It's awareness. It's awareness of how your brain works and doesn't work, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's awareness of the noise in your mind. It's awareness of what ADHD is, why it happens, and it's awareness also of the tools available to you and your own behaviors and the little foibles that you have. Just being aware of like why you procrastinate and stuff like that. And I won't go off into any one of these areas, but it's awareness. Get aware of why you feel this way, why you struggle. And the most important awareness is to be aware to not beat yourself up. Because when you beat yourself up, you're burning energy, you're wasting time, you are deepening the lack of self-esteem or whatever that that horrible feeling you have about yourself is. And I'm in there in that category. But have grace toward yourself and just know that it's a journey and keep trying.
So if you were talking to someone and they were in that place of self-deprecation and getting down on themselves, what advice would you give them? What would you tell them to do?
I would definitely tell them to try to catch themselves. This is part of the awareness thing, right? Just try
Mm.
to catch yourself when you're talking to yourself in a certain way, or when you're lambasting yourself, and just see if you can catch it. See if you can catch yourself in the act. It's a hard thing to do, but with a little bit of practice, you can start to hear the language you're using about yourself, or the fact that, hey, I screwed up again. Here I go. I'm no good. I'll never be able to. Da da da. And just catch that. And you're not going to correct it, but if you can just catch it, you can go, oh, look, I'm doing that again. That's that thing that I'm doing. And then once you can catch it, you can start to change the dialogue a little bit. And so there are two sort of directions that you want to point your dialogue in. The first one is, I'm trying. I
Mm.
am trying. I'm trying. That's way better than I screwed up again, right? Or I suck at this, right? I am trying. And the other thing, and this is really important, and I'm all about evidence-based hacks and solutions. As some of you out there know, you know this, Alex, but address yourself in the third person. And if you can do that with your name, or you can do it with a term of endearment. So I used to call myself dummy, because that's what my father called me. My father was an alcoholic, and I also screwed up. I was kind of a dummy. I screwed up a lot of things. I cracked up every car I ever owned or borrowed. And so I just, when I'd do something wrong, or I'd fail at something, I'd go, you dummy. And I'd walk out loud. I'd say, you dummy. And then I realized, especially after having read some research on this, that it's just so destructive. And so I switched that, and now I call myself buddy. Hey,
Mm.
buddy, you know what? You're trying. Hang in there, buddy. Okay, buddy, let's get back to work now. Buddy, let's not be procrastinating on this thing. Let's find out why we're procrastinating on it. What is it we don't like about this thing, et cetera. So, one, see if you can catch yourself in beating yourself up. All right. Acknowledge it, recognize that it burns energy. It's not moving you forward. It's not helping you. It's okay to know, yeah, I did this wrong. I messed that up. Okay. But the self flagellation is not helping you. And then see if you can change the way you are speaking to yourself, the way you're addressing yourself. All right, Alan, let's get down here. Let's dive into this. Let's get this going, or whatever that is.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that. If I'm hearing you right, it's all about creating that self-compassion towards yourself and really building that up. And I like that you acknowledge that it's not easy. It won't happen right away. It's
Yes,
a switch you can
yes,
flip. Yeah, that's really good.
yeah. That's important to know too. That's important to be aware that it's not easy.
Mm.
Because if somebody says, yeah, just go do this, and you think, and you're given the impression it's going to be easy, the moment you can't do it, that's when you go, well, it's supposed to be easy and I can't do it. Therefore, I will never be able to do it. But if you know it's hard going in, and I'll just throw another thing out here too, go for imperfect consistency. You know, you do not need to go and start, a new habit or behavior or routine and be perfect. You're not going to be perfect. I'm still imperfect, but I'm okay with my imperfect consistency. I just try to do things most of the time. So do that too. When you're trying to listen for that voice in your head that's beating yourself up, or when you're trying to change the way you speak to yourself, you're not going to do it right away. You're not going to do it often early on, but just keep at it and be okay with being imperfect doing it. Just keep trying.
Nice. I really like that. And speaking of imperfection or doing things in unusual ways, one question I like to ask my guests on this show is, what's one thing you do because of ADHD that's unusual?
All right, I'm gonna give you one from the darkish side.
Okay.
I create systems that are a mess. I will create an elaborate system, and I'll get it to the point where, and what so let me give you a few examples. It's like a system of keeping track of certain information, or a system of doing a procedure or something that has to be done repeatedly or whatever. Just like a system of organizing and maintaining my ideas about things. And my systems will be messy, overly complicated, sometimes hard for me to remember what my system is. And this is very much because of ADHD. We are not linear thinkers. We're not, well, clearly we need a system that does this, then that, then that. Now, when you get to this juncture, you go this here, blah, blah. That's that. We're like, oh, throw some stuff over there. And I think there should be a thing over here. And then blah, blah, right? So that's definitely, I've never been asked a question the way you just asked it. So I think this is the first time I've ever talked about this. And my systems are so wacky. And I want to say two things about them. One, they're wacky because they're not simple. And they're so wacky that when I'm working with one of my assistants, they'll be like, Alan, I appreciate your system, but why don't you just have it do this? And I go, oh, oh, I really, I never, okay, great, let's do it that, right? But the other thing about systems, and this is a word of encouragement, is that even if your system is a mess and if it's working, if it's helping you more than not having any system at all, keep working your system. Don't give up on your system, because your system gradually you'll start to realize, actually this doesn't work. I need to actually do this over here, or I need to move this there, or I need to have this column in my sheet or whatever. And your system is going to grow with you or become less ADHD over time. So there's my biggest ADHD trait that I see every day. And I love my systems.
Mm-hmm.
They're me, and they serve me. And I've got a gazillion systems that help me every day. And they're all messy and all over the place, some more than others, but they work for me and I don't give up on them. And I'm imperfect. I'm imperfect. I'm imperfectly consistent on all my systems.
That's great. Speaking of imperfect systems, I know one of the things you like to talk about is a morning ritual.
Mm.
So if you could explain a little bit of what that means, and B,
Yeah.
what yours looks like.
Yeah. So let's just talk about, well, I'm just going to quickly define a morning ritual in the simplest terms. A morning ritual is when you pause before you start doing stuff and you just pause and you just ask, all right, everybody, what's going on today? Right? Just that pause. And the reason that pause is so important, and I'll come back to what the morning ritual is or can be. The reason that's so important is because in the absence of that pause, what do? We jump into our emails. We go to the news headlines. We just go start doing without making conscious, wise, intentional choices. And this is I call it autopilot. I'm just on autopilot all day. I'm just doing whatever comes at me, whatever what I call my outlaw brain pops into my head. Let's go do that, blah, blah, let's go, blah, 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 blah. And this is the number one reason why at the end of the day or the end of the week, we go, I have been working all day or all week, and I still don't have things done, the important things done, right? A morning ritual shuts off autopilot because it has you pause and just ask. And really, there are just really three questions. You can do a morning ritual in 60 seconds. We're not talking about meditation for 4. We're talking about 60 seconds. So here's a morning ritual that I invite everyone to try. 1, what's going on today? Like, where do I got to show up? Oh, I got this thing with Alex today at so-and-so time. I've got this at 1:30. I've got that at 4:30, and I've got this at 6. Right? That's actually what's going on for the rest of my day. And so they enter into they're in my calendar, and then I create a little alarms for them. So 10 minutes before each thing, an alarm pops up that says, you're going to be talking to Alex, or you're going to have this. There's a simple thing that reduces a lot of, angst and mistakes and all that. So just that act alone, if you did nothing more than just do that, your life will become a little simpler. But the second question to ask is, okay, I know where I got to show up and what time I got to show up for other things. Where might there be a block of time, ideally in my mentally stronger time, where I can work on me stuff, the important, what I call the biggies, one of my biggies, like I finish my taxes or work on that project for work or whatever. Where's one chunk of time that I might be able to do something like that? And then the third question is, all right, great. I've got this chunk of time that I won't be interrupted. I don't have to be somewhere else or be on Zoom or whatever. What should I work on? Now, that can be a tricky question, but we're not going to get into that. But those three questions: what's going on today? Where's there an open block for me to work on my stuff? And what's one thing I should work on? You do that, and I'm telling you, you will feel less overwhelmed very, very quickly, because you're going to start getting the right things done. You're going to be on autopilot less. Now, one thing that a lot of our folks out there might be asking is, Alan, I can't remember to do anything like that. I know what'll happen. I'll do it for 3 days and then I'll forget to do it, et cetera, et cetera. But for all of us, there's something that we do every morning without fail. And I'm going to use the example of coffee, right? For you coffee drinkers out there who drink coffee every morning, you make a cup of coffee when you get up. That's one of the first things you do. And it happens every day almost. What if you were to put a sticky on that coffee maker that just said, pause and plan, morning ritual or whatever? And so when you see your coffee maker, you see that bright colored sticky and you go, oh, okay. So I'm going to brew my coffee. While I'm brewing my coffee, I'm going to ask the three questions. So that's an important part of that. I didn't want to leave that out. Now, I have a slightly more elaborate morning ritual. All right. And it is on a sticky. I see it every morning. I do it every morning. That's my morning ritual. Now, that's 9 steps. It only takes 4 minutes with the exception of one thing in here. And I'm just going to tell you 1 or 2 things that are in here among my 9 little steps that are really important, as long as we're talking about morning rituals. All right. Thing 1, which is number 3 on my list: only check your emails and texts. Only check in the morning, right? Don't do emails in the morning, because most folks, their strongest time is in the morning, right? You just check to make sure there's no crisis going on, right? But then you do your emails later in the day, like 11 a.m. or something like that, because the moment you enter into your emails, you're going to burn so much gas, so much fuel, so much time that will be now stolen from your ability to do your hard stuff, right? What's one other thing? Oh, one other thing for my morning ritual: gratitude. I identify 3 things for which I'm grateful every day. The research tells us that doing that actually rewires your brain. That's directly the phrase from the research. And so just consider that. I don't want to load you up with too much stuff, but maybe that's question number 4 in your pause and plan. What's going on today? Where's there an open block for me to do some work? What should I work on? And what are 3 things that I'm grateful for? You do that, you're gonna start to feel a little bit less overwhelmed.
Awesome. Yeah. So I want to ask you before we go about the ADD Crusher TV, or whatever it's called. If you could remind me of what it's called. Crusher TV, is that what it's called?
Well, I got a couple things, right? So
Okay, yeah.
first is ADD Crusher, and that is an online video, audio, and PDF program that's a virtual coach. I teach 10 basic strategies or ways, 10 ways to crush your ADHD. And I created this some time ago. We've won the Chad Innovative Program Award. So it's an award-winning program, and you can learn more about that at addcrusher.com. But then I also have a membership called Crusher TV. And members can access a library of over 100 mini masterclasses on productivity and personal development. They're just 20 to 30-minute episodes or mini masterclasses, and there are over 100 of them on topics like procrastination, prioritization, time management, overwhelm, some personal development stuff. That's Crusher TV at crushertv.com. So 2 related but distinct things.
So I'm also curious, and this might take us down a rabbit hole, but how did you go from ad executive to working with people with ADHD?
That's a great question. So when over the years after my diagnosis, I was really doing well in the advertising business. Again, I told you about that 2.5 year period where I went from account executive to VP and employee of the year. I also co-founded a startup in 2000 that was later sold for 8 figures. And I got back into advertising, and I was just really doing really well. My ADHD felt very crushed, and it was, and to this day, it's 10% curse, but it's 90% gift. And everyone can get to this. It's just a matter of working little systems, your crazy systems, and then other other hacks and strategies on a regular basis. But I just realized that I was working all these strategies that were just helping me, and I had my job, so I was making a lot of money in the advertising business. It was great. I was working at a New York ad agency, left my third agency at that time, and I thought, this stuff, there's there's no video out there. That now there are lots of videos now. There was nothing back in 2009, 10 when I had the idea, because the only thing there was then was like books. When there's nothing wrong with books. I've written a book, but for adults with ADHD, you kind of want a book that has some pictures and cartoons, maybe, and not 384 pages of pure text, which I can't read very well. So I just had this idea. I'd had the idea for a while, but in 2009, when I really had things really rocking, I was a single guy, living in New York, had, I had time, I had the bandwidth, I had the energy. And so I just started creating ADD Crusher. And when I did, I shared it with Lori Dupar, who now is a coach to coaches. She runs IACT, which is a coach training institution. And she loved it. I didn't show it to anybody but her. And she loved it so much, she shared it with David Gwerk and said, "What do you think of it?" And David Gwerk is they're both heroes of mine, mentors of mine. And David Gwerk, who's the president and founder of ADCO, where I trained, and I think you trained also, Alex, the ADD Coach Academy, he said, "Alan, this is great." So then David said, "You really should be a coach. You should be a certified coach." And I thought, okay, because I wasn't. I created ADD Crusher without being a coach. I was just sharing my strategies that really worked. So he convinced me to become a coach, and I trained at ADCA. And that's when I really started coaching, after ADD Crusher was already introduced. So that's how I became a coach. And then I quit the advertising business because I was just loving what I'm doing and what I still do to this day.
Well, thank you for sharing with us today. Thank you for being on the show. If people want more Alan P. Brown, what are all the ways they can find you?
First of all, be in touch. Send an email if you've got a question. Send an email to info@addcrusher.com with any question you have. I respond to all of them. But also go to addcrusher.com. There's an ebook there called 5 Things You're Doing Every Day That Make Your ADHD Worse. And we're doing all of them, folks. And go check that out. Now, that'll put you on our mailing list. We send out a newsletter every week or two, nothing crazy. And it's always something that you can use. So go grab that free ebook, 5 Things You're Doing Every Day That Make Your ADHD Worse, and maybe start to work on not doing them so much. That's it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Don't want to pitch your book or anything like that?
No. Go to ADD Crusher is pitch enough.
Okay.
Just letting folks know about that, and that's fabulous. Yeah.
All right. addcrusher.com.
And thanks for having me. This is a great conversation, as always.
Yeah, it's always great to
Enjoyed it.
connect with you, and I hope to see you soon. So thank you for watching. This has been Let's Talk ADHD with Alex High, and today, Alan P. Brown.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Alex.